the book. And my oldest brother is here. I would like to apologize in advance since I'm reading one of the broadest chapters. But for those of you who haven't read it, it's called ASL. If you have the book, you can follow along on the first page. And by page 1, not the Roman numeral page 1. At only 11 years of age, I was a cyber hoe. Looking back, I'm embarrassed. For me, for my parents. But oddly enough, my cyber social debauchery is indirectly correlated with my current status as a so-called internet pioneer. It all started when I began catfishing, creating characters and transmitting them over the internet. Though back then, people just called it lying. Had my father not signed my entire family up with America Online accounts for the computer in our modest Potomac, Maryland home, I don't know that I'd have had the tools to exploit the early ages of the internet. 2 years earlier, my oldest brother, Amadou, had gone away to college at Morehouse, freeing up the coveted computer which was housed in the basement for my use. Before he decamped for college, I would spend hours at a time watching him type the commands into MS-DOS that would transport us to the magical kingdom of Sierra's King's Quest VI on our IBM. I never had a strong desire to play the game myself. I always assumed I wasn't smart enough to play it on my own, until Amadou graduated from the house and I no longer had anyone to excitedly observe. I looked up to my oldest brother as the epitome of intelligence. He knew everything, though he was too humble to be ostentatious with his knowledge as I would have been had I been as smart. So I simply observed. At 18, he was an official adult, and he had a duty to selflessly spread his intelligence to the world, other people's younger sisters included. His absence left a void in my heart and in the basement, particularly where the use of the computer was concerned. I wasn't next in the line for the computer, but my second oldest brother, Malik, was too preoccupied with football, girls, and high school to care. He'd occasionally make use of it for term papers and Tetris, but otherwise, it was mine for the taking. Using the computer wasn't foreign to me by any means. I had an old Apple computer in my very own room, which was a double source of jealousy from my younger brother, where I played number munchers and self-published my stories on perforated paper from an excruciatingly noisy printer. "Joyce, are you wasting paper again?" my mother would yell from her makeshift home office, tipped off by the mechanical snitch. When alone and mom-approved, I actually loved to hear the robotic crunching and whirring that the printer made while laying to ink my very own written words. But the computer in my room paled in comparison to the one downstairs in the basement. For one thing, the large floppy disks, and I think they were actually called hard disks, what the fuck, 90s? were becoming extinct, and rightfully so, since the data on those things could be lost with a smudge of a finger. And since my computer took only the hard disks, my game choices were limited to nerdy learning games and text-based adventure games with no visuals. Boo. The other reason my computer wasn't a huge triumph for my preteen self-discovery was because it lacked a modem, which meant no dial-up internet for me. But AOL changed my life. Specifically, it changed my social life. Okay, to be more precise, AOL gave me a social life. It ignited my social development and expanded my concept of sexuality. Because of AOL, I had imaginary friends that weren't imaginary. I had elaborate conversations devoid of awkward silences, and perhaps most valuable of all, I could actually talk to boys at my command. Before my parents caught wind of frightening news reports of child predators, I spent my days and after-school evenings in chat rooms, learning to speed read, talking to kids my age who were also ahead of the curve, or pedophiles, who were remarkably creative and persistent in their forbidden pursuit. Pedos actually had it made in the mid-90s before the media exposed them. Talk about the glory days. My friends at school, other fifth graders, didn't seem to relate when I mentioned chat rooms and profiles, or when I sang along to the dial-up internet song I made up in my head. It seemed that for a brief moment, only I was privy to this alternate American universe that lived online. By the time my family moved to Los Angeles to join my dad, a pediatrician who had seized an opportunity to open his own family clinic there, my relationship with the computer had grown immensely, much to the dismay and irritation of my mother. "You're always on the computer. Go do your homework." "I already finished." "Well, then go outside and play." She just didn't get it. Only recently, in my late 20s, did she come to realize that my excessive computer use is what led me to becoming the self-employed, almost focused career woman I am today. By the summer of 1996, more of my friends from Maryland had adopted AOL. It helped us bridge the 3,000 miles between us, and by then I was already over the handwritten letters of yesteryear. That was a form of communication of the third world, reserved for pen pals from Ghana and Spain. Besides, the "You've got mail" greeting was way more exciting than the dead silence of receiving a letter. And exclaiming, "I've got mail" in the foyer to yourself isn't the same. It was through electronic mail that I'd tell my friends back home about my Hollywood adventures. Never mind the fact that I lived in Windsor Hills, 30 minutes away from Hollywood, and that I was struggling to make friends, or that my sense of style was horrendous and my middle school had done away with lockers so the authorities could better monitor drug use. All I ever wanted was a locker. I felt robbed of the middle school experience I saw on Boy Meets World and Doug. But my friends didn't have to know that. I led them to believe I was on the brink of stardom just by breathing in the recycled smog of other celebrities around me. Plus, I lived down the street from Ray Charles' old house, so I was famous by association. Skipping ahead, I so longed to live with my father and see my family complete. I neglected to figure out that the reunion meant double supervision. The only computer in the house was in my dad's home office, and now my internet activity was being monitored without my knowing it. Going through puberty during the dawn of the internet could have left me unscathed if my dad weren't so annoyingly tech-savvy. If only he, a native African, were like the tribal stereotypes I read about in my middle school history book, I would have gotten away with so much more. Instead, I found myself sneaking to look up sex in the encyclopedia and then cross-referencing my findings with the Yahoo.com search results. Also, unbeknownst to me, my dad had added a kid-safe image blocker, so I was always limited to boring text-only definitions. I was wrought with hormones and obsessed with finding a boyfriend. All I knew was that boys cared about sex, and I didn't know enough about it. I was too embarrassed to ask my peers. They were already uber judgmental about my naivete to all things black after I accidentally exposed myself when Tupac died. Tupac died? What are you saying? Normally I would have been spared from middle school humiliation by asking my two older brothers directly. They would have happily explained who Tupac was, and I would have happily plagiarized their responses and relayed their feelings about him as my own. But my second oldest brother had by then also graduated from the house to go to college, and I was left as the oldest in the house. If I had trouble attracting the boys at my school before, my ignorance about Tupac destroyed any remote chance. All I knew was that I had all these developing feelings for boys and that I wanted desperately for them to notice me. They did, but for reasons that didn't help my quest. My natural hair, my underdeveloped, seemingly concave breasts, my white girl accent, and my tomboyish appearance. The prototype of lust for the boys my age was a light-skinned girl with long hair, and I just didn't fit that profile. But I didn't want to believe that. So I would imagine instead that I held the interest of all the boys and often convinced myself of that. All the while, I remained the continued object of disdain from my peers. I often found myself emboldened whenever a guy would show me any attention at all, i.e., "Hey, you did the homework? Let me copy." Or, "You got 10 cents for the vending machine?" I blame any misread social cues on Saved by the Bell. Zach and Kelly's romance was something I wanted so badly to emulate. Am I good on time? I will stop it there. Thank you, guys.